I tried to win our fight with a savage Instagram post. Now I'm performing an autopsy on my relationship in our empty apartment. The silence in our apartment is what's so deafening. It's not just quiet, it's scrubbed clean of life. The air doesn't smell like Marcus's ridiculously strong coffee anymore, a scent that used to be the first thing I noticed every morning. The pile of city planning magazines he always left on the floor is gone. Even his worn-out running shoes, the ones I constantly complained about tripping over, have vanished from their spot by the door. He didn't just leave, he performed a surgical extraction, removing every trace of himself with a precision that feels both impressive and terrifying. And I'm not crying. I should be, right? Instead, I feel clinical. It's a strange kind of numbness, a self-preservation mechanism that keeps the screaming locked somewhere deep in my chest. I'm a pathologist in a lab coat, standing over the cold body of our 3-year relationship, ready to make the first cut. My mission is to determine the cause of death. My gaze settles on the sofa, now looking ridiculously large and empty. He forgot one thing, a lumpy, faded blue pillow we bought at a street fair on our first anniversary. It's absurd that this thing, filled with cheap polyester, is the sole survivor. It's the only piece of evidence left at the crime scene. So I sit here, in the sterile quiet, staring at that stupid pillow, and I begin the autopsy. Where was the fatal wound? The procedure begins with a look at the subject's history. Marcus and I were a textbook case of opposites attract, or so I like to tell myself. We were together for 3 years. He's a city planner, a man whose entire world is built on logic, principles, and predictable outcomes. His life is a grid system, every street named, every zone designated. Mine is a Jackson Pollock painting, chaotic, emotional, and interpreted differently by everyone who looks at it. I work in PR, a high-stakes, fast-paced environment where the narrative is everything. My job is literally to manufacture buzz, to control perception, to win the story. I'm good at it. Too good, it turns out. I didn't just leave that mindset at the office. I brought it home and applied it to our life. Every disagreement became a campaign, every argument a press conference where I had to emerge as the sympathetic party. The friction was always there, a low-grade hum of incompatibility we mostly ignored. He found my spontaneity reckless. I found his meticulous planning suffocating. I'd call him rigid and unromantic. He'd call me overly dramatic. We treated it like a cute character quirk, a running joke. The kind of thing you laugh about with friends over brunch. You won't believe what Marcus did this time. He made a spreadsheet for our grocery list. But it wasn't a quirk. It was a fault line, deep and unstable, running right through the foundation of what we were building. The tremor that finally brought the whole house down was our planned trip to Bali. We had been planning it for months, a real, unplugged vacation. Then, a week before we were supposed to leave, Marcus sat me down on the very sofa I'm staring at now. His face had a gray, worried tint to it. His mentor, an old professor who had basically been a father figure to him, had a sudden, severe heart attack. Marcus explained in his calm, measured way that he had to cancel. He needed to be there. It was, he said, a matter of principle and responsibility. I heard the words, but I didn't listen. All I could register was the searing hot wave of my own disappointment. A canceled trip, broken promises. To me, it was just another piece of evidence in a long-running case I was building against him. Marcus versus my needs. In my mind, his mentor was just an excuse. My cognitive arrogance, the same trait that makes me a killer publicist, flared up. I was convinced my feelings were the most important fact in the room. His loyalty, his sense of duty. In my story, those were just inconvenient plot points I needed to write around. I saw his moral obligation as a personal slight, a clear sign that he simply wasn't as invested as I was. I didn't see a man torn by loyalty. I saw an opponent backing out of a deal. And in my world, when someone breaks a deal, you make them pay for it. So I went to Bali alone. Fueled by a potent cocktail of self-pity and righteous indignation, I was determined to have the trip of a lifetime without him, and more importantly, to make sure he knew it. The first few days were a performance piece for an audience of one. I sent him a steady stream of texts, each one a carefully crafted missile of passive aggression. A photo of a romantic beachfront dinner for two, with his side of the table conspicuously empty. A selfie of me looking wistfully out at the ocean, captioned, Wish you were here to see how much fun I'm having. It was a pathetic, transparent attempt to make him feel guilty, to force him into the role of the villain I needed him to be. His replies were infuriatingly polite. Looks beautiful, live, glad you're enjoying it. Stay safe, talk when you get back. He refused to engage. He wouldn't take the bait, wouldn't rise to the fight I was so desperately trying to pick from thousands of miles away. His calm, his refusal to participate in my manufactured drama, felt like the ultimate insult. It was like he wasn't even acknowledging the narrative I was working so hard to create. The one where I was the beautiful, tragic victim of his neglect. Every polite, detached message felt like he was patting me on the head, dismissing my tantrum as childish. The more he resisted, the more determined I became to make him feel something, anything. The final day was when I decided to escalate. I was at Jimbaran Bay, the sky bleeding into a perfect, postcard-worthy sunset. Tourists all around me were holding hands, taking pictures, soaking in the romance of it all. I felt a bitter, ugly knot tighten in my stomach. This was supposed to be our sunset. This was the moment he had described to me from a travel blog, the one we were supposed to share. Seeing other couples happy felt like a personal attack. I flagged down a stranger, a friendly-looking tourist, and handed them my phone. Could you just get one of me with the sunset? Make it look happy. I put on my best performance yet. I threw my head back, a wide, carefree smile plastered on my face, arms stretched out as if embracing my newfound freedom. It was a perfect shot. I looked happy, wild, and completely unbothered. Then came the caption. I typed it out with trembling, furious fingers, the words feeling powerful and sharp on my tongue. Finally free from the dead weight, best decision ever. I hit post. For a fleeting, glorious moment, I felt a surge of triumph. It was a perfectly executed PR move. Savage. Unforgettable. I had won. I had controlled the narrative. I had reduced our entire, complicated relationship into a clever, cutting one-liner for public consumption. I sat there on the cooling sand, watching the likes and fire emojis roll in from my friends, feeling a hollow, toxic sense of victory. I had no idea I had just signed our relationship's death certificate. I thought I was dropping a microphone. I was actually pulling the pin on a grenade in the middle of our life. When I got back, Marcus was waiting for me. I walked into the apartment, still buzzing from the residual glow of my victory. Expecting either a full-blown argument or a sulking man I'd have to coax back into a good mood. I got neither. The air was still and heavy, like the moments before a thunderstorm. He was sitting on the sofa, the same spot I'm in now, and his face was unnervingly calm. There was no anger, no shouting, no slammed doors. That, more than anything, scared me. In my world, anger is a currency. It means the other person still cares enough to fight. This placid emptiness was a language I didn't understand. He didn't even say hello. He just held up his phone, the screen glowing in the dim light of the living room. It was open to my Instagram post. My triumphant sunset photo looked garish and cruel under his silent scrutiny. The caption, finally free from the dead weight, hung in the air between us, ugly and undeniable. It looked so much smaller and pettier on his screen than it had on mine. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet. So quiet I had to strain to hear it, but every word landed like a shard of ice. My mother died of cancer when I was 15, Olivia, he began, his eyes fixed on me, unwavering. He recited the facts of his life like he was reading an official report, a history I already knew but had clearly never understood. My dad fell apart. He drank. He wasn't there. Professor Albright, he was the one who pulled me out of that. He drove me to my SATs because my dad was passed out. He helped me with my college applications. He co-signed my first student loan. He was the one who sat in the front row at my graduation because my dad couldn't be bothered to show up. I've told you all of this. He paused and the silence was excruciating. I opened my mouth to say something, an excuse, a justification, anything, but no words came out. My entire arsenal of witty comebacks and strategic deflections was useless. They were weapons for a battle. This was a sentencing. He's like a father to me, Marcus continued, his voice steady but hollowed out, devoid of all emotion. I thought, of all people, you would understand what that means. I thought you'd understand that my need to be there for him wasn't a choice against you, but a duty to him. A principle. But you didn't. You took my loyalty, my grief, my sense of responsibility, and you called it dead weight. You announced it to the world, for likes. The way he said the word likes made it sound like the most disgusting thing he could imagine. He looked at me then, and for the first time I saw the full depth of the damage. It wasn't anger in his eyes. It was something far worse, a complete and total absence of feeling. It was the look you give a stranger you accidentally bump into on the street. It was the look of a circuit breaker that had been flipped. The connection was dead. I can't be with someone who would do that, he said, delivering the final verdict with the dispassionate finality of a judge. I can't build a life with someone whose first instinct is to publicly humiliate me to win a fight. That's not a partnership, that's a PR campaign, and I'm done being your opposition. He stood up, and for the first time, I noticed the packed duffel bag by the door. It had been there the whole time. Marcus walked out the door without another word. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the silent apartment. My immediate, pathetic reaction was still rooted in the tactics I knew best. I ran after him, my voice finally finding its footing, spewing a torrent of useless, self-serving phrases. Marcus, wait, it was just a stupid joke. I was just mad, you're overreacting. Each excuse sounded flimsy and false even to my own ears. He didn't slow down. He didn't turn around. He just kept walking down the hall until the elevator doors swallowed him whole. The next morning, I did what I always do when I need validation. I called our mutual friend, Jessica. I launched into my carefully curated version of the story, painting myself as the heartbroken girlfriend and Marcus as the cold, unfeeling man who would throw away 3 years over a single, silly Instagram post. I cried on cue. I used all the right words. I was looking for an ally, for someone to tell me I was right and he was crazy. But Jessica didn't offer the soothing platitudes I expected. There was a long, uncomfortable silence on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was stripped of its usual warmth. It was cautious, measured. "Liv," she said, and the way she used my name felt like a warning. "Honestly, what were you thinking?" I started to stammer another defense, but she cut me off. "No, really. We all know the story with Professor Albright. Marcus doesn't talk about his family much, but he talks about him. He's the man who saved his life. You know that. That post, that wasn't a joke. That was a character assassination. You took the best part of him, his loyalty, his sense of duty, and you put it on a public billboard for everyone to laugh at. You made him look like a punchline in his own life story." Her words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air out of my lungs and dismantling the entire self-pitying narrative I had constructed. I didn't think of it like that," I whispered, the pathetic inadequacy of the statement hanging in the air. "That's the problem, Liv," she said, her voice softening slightly, but not with pity, with a kind of clinical sadness. "You didn't think, you just reacted. You wanted to win. This time, I really don't know how to help you. I'm not sure anyone can." That was the moment the first real crack appeared in my armor of self-righteousness. It wasn't Marcus leaving that did it. It was the reflection of my actions in the eyes of a friend. The next few days were a blur of numb disbelief. I kept expecting him to call, to text, to at least send a furious, multi-paragraph email. But there was nothing, just a profound, unnerving silence. My attempts to reach him were met with the digital equivalent of a brick wall. My calls went straight to voicemail. My texts were delivered but remained unread. He had surgically removed me from his life with the same precision he'd used to remove his belongings from our apartment. On the third day, driven by a desperate, churning need to find evidence that he was the bad guy, that he had been planning this all along, I started tearing the place apart. I was looking for a clue, an affair, a secret bank account, anything that would shift the blame. Anything to prove that my Instagram post wasn't the cause of death, but merely the final symptom of a pre-existing disease. I found nothing, just the clean, orderly remnants of his life with me. Finally, I got to his desk in the small study we shared, and that's where I found it. Tucked inside a drawer beneath a stack of orderly files was a sketchbook. It was open to a recent page. On it was a detailed, hand-drawn sketch of our living room, but it was different. In the corner where I always complained there was bad lighting, he had designed a beautiful, built-in reading nook, complete with shelves and a cozy-looking window seat. His neat, architectural handwriting filled the margins with notes. Order oak samples, Liv likes warm tones. Check dimensions for recessed lighting. Surprise for third anniversary. The last entry was dated. It was from the day before I left for Bali. I sank to the floor, the sketchbook clutched in my hands. The air rushed out of me in a single, ragged gasp. This was the real evidence. Not of his betrayal, but of his commitment. While I was stewing in my own manufactured outrage, convinced he didn't care, he was here. He was quietly, methodically, lovingly planning our future. He was designing a space for me, thinking about the colors I liked, planning a surprise to celebrate the very relationship I was about to blow up. The man I had so cavalierly dismissed as dead weight was trying, in his own practical, non-dramatic way, to build me a haven. And I, in return, had burned the whole goddamn house down. Which brings me back to now. Back to the silence, the empty space, and the lumpy blue pillow. The autopsy is complete. The report is written in my head in stark, unforgiving ink. Cause of death. A fatal wound, inflicted by me, wielded by an arrogance so profound I couldn't see the love right in front of my face. The weapon was a smartphone, the ammunition a few carelessly cruel words. I know I'm the villain of this story, I get it. My brain has processed the facts, analyzed the evidence, and reached the logical conclusion. But my heart is a stupid, stubborn traitor. Because late at night, when the numbness wears off and the crushing weight of what I've done settles in, a venomous little voice still whispers in my ear. But why couldn't he just compromise? For me, just once. Why did his damn principles have to be more important than my feelings? And then, another, colder voice, the voice of the pathologist who has just stitched up the corpse, replies without emotion. Because you went out of your way to prove, in the most public way imaginable, that you weren't worthy of that compromise. I'm trapped between those two voices, ping-ponging between furious self-justification and crushing self-loathing. 1 minute I'm composing a scathing, unsent text message listing all his faults, and the next I'm sobbing on the floor, clutching the sketchbook to my chest, whispering I'm sorry to an empty room. I destroyed everything, and for what? To win an argument that only existed in my head. And the most pathetic part, that arrogant, selfish publicist inside me, the one who always needs to have the last word, still isn't completely dead. She's just been silenced, for now.